The sky over Earth changed in a single morning. People first thought it was clouds. Then they thought it was a strange weather event. Soon, every screen in every city showed the same thing. Huge shapes rested above the planet, silent and bright. They did not burn the air. They did not attack. They simply waited. The ships were smooth and wide, like silver islands floating in the sky. Light moved across their surfaces in slow waves. No sound came from them. No weapons were visible. This made many people more afraid than if the ships had arrived with fire. Across the world, people stopped working. Streets filled with quiet crowds staring upward. Children pointed. Adults whispered. Some cried. Others prayed. Planes were grounded. Satellites were pushed aside without damage, as if guided by careful hands. Within hours, a message reached every nation at the same time. The voice was calm. It was clear. It spoke perfect human language. "We are the Galactic Federation," the voice said. "We come in peace. Humanity has reached a dangerous point. You are divided. You fight among yourselves. You risk destroying your own world. We are here to guide you." The message repeated again and again. World leaders were taken to secure locations. Emergency meetings filled underground rooms. Screens showed the ships from every angle. Some leaders were pale with fear. Others tried to hide it behind firm words. A few felt relief. Someone stronger had arrived. Someone wiser. The Federation spoke again, this time directly to governments. "You are not being invaded," they said. "You are being protected. Left alone, your species will fall. With guidance, you will survive and grow." Many leaders listened closely. They had seen war. They had seen famine. They had seen climate disasters. The Federation's words sounded reasonable, logical, safe. But not everyone felt comfort. In a small coastal city, Daniel Reed stood on the roof of his apartment building and looked up. He was no longer a pilot, but he still thought like one. He watched how the ships held position, how they adjusted with care, how they controlled space without effort. Daniel had flown combat missions years ago. He had seen powerful forces claim they were helping. He had seen how easy it was to call control protection. His neighbor, an old man named Peter, climbed the stairs slowly and joined him. "They say they're here to save us," Peter said, his voice shaking. "Maybe it's true." Daniel did not answer right away. He kept his eyes on the sky. "Help that comes with chains is not help," Daniel finally said. Peter frowned. "They haven't chained anyone." "Not yet," Daniel replied. Around the world, reactions spread fast. Some people cheered. They waved flags and signs at the sky. They believed the Federation would end war, hunger, and disease. They believed humanity had finally been noticed. Others were angry. Protests formed in major cities. People shouted that Earth did not ask for rulers from the stars. Soldiers stood between crowds and government buildings, unsure who the real enemy might be. The Federation sent small craft down to Earth. They landed in open fields, deserts, and empty plains. Tall beings stepped out. They were not monsters. They were thin, calm, and almost gentle in movement. Their eyes were large and dark. Their voices were soft. They spoke of unity. They spoke of order. They spoke of rules. "Your species is young," they said. "You need structure, guidance, limits." Daniel watched one of these meetings on a public broadcast. The alien speaker smiled as it talked about peace. "Freedom without wisdom leads to ruin," the alien said. "We will help you avoid that fate." Daniel felt a cold weight in his chest. He had heard similar words before, spoken by humans with power. That night, Daniel met with a few old friends. Mark Evans, an engineer. Laura Brooks, a scientist. Helen Moore, a teacher. They sat in a quiet room with the lights off, watching the glow of the ships through the window. "They say they won't rule us," Mark said. "But they want to guide every major decision." Laura crossed her arms. "They already call us weak." Helen spoke softly. "They talk like parents talking to children. But children grow by making mistakes." Daniel nodded. "And by choosing." Days passed. The Federation stayed in the sky. No attacks came. No threats were made. That worried Daniel more than anything. Governments began signing agreements. The Federation offered technology, energy systems, medical knowledge. But there were conditions. Human space travel would be limited. Weapons research would be monitored. Major decisions would require Federation approval. "Temporary," the aliens said. "Until humanity is stable." People argued on every channel. Some called the agreements a blessing. Others called them surrender. Daniel walked through the city and listened. Fear was everywhere. So was hope. But underneath both, he sensed something else growing quietly. Pride. Humans did not like being called weak. One evening, as the sun set behind the glowing ships, Daniel stood alone again on the roof. He watched how the light from the alien craft slowly dimmed and brightened, like steady breathing. "They think we need them," he said to the empty air. He remembered every hard landing. Every mission where things went wrong. Humans survived not because they were perfect but because they adapted. In homes and small rooms across Earth, similar thoughts formed. People talked in low voices. They asked questions. They shared doubts. They did not yet resist. But they began to think. The Federation believed humanity was divided and afraid. They were only partly right. Fear was there. Division was there. But so was something the aliens did not fully understand yet. Humans did not reject help out of pride alone. They rejected help that took away the right to choose. And as the silent ships watched from above, humanity quietly began to remember who they were. The change did not come with soldiers or loud commands. It came with smiles, papers, and calm voices. Federation advisors arrived quietly. They sat beside presidents, ministers, and council members. They did not take the main seats. They stood just behind them, watching, listening, and offering advice that was hard to refuse. "For your safety," they always said. New rules spread across Earth. Space launches were delayed or canceled. Deep space research was paused. Satellites were allowed only with Federation approval. Military projects were reviewed and reshaped. Even civilian science faced limits. At first, life felt easier. Energy was stable. Power failures stopped. Medical systems improved with alien knowledge. Food production became efficient. Natural disasters were predicted early and losses were smaller. People slept better at night. But something else began to slow. Engineer Mark Evans noticed it first at the Orbital Research Center where he worked. He had spent years fixing problems that no one else could solve. He enjoyed the challenge. Now, whenever an issue appeared, a Federation advisor stepped in. "Do not adjust that system," the advisor said calmly one day. "Follow this approved solution." Mark frowned. "But that won't work long term. I have a better idea." The advisor smiled. "Your idea is risky. This is safer." Mark followed the order. The system worked, for a while. Then it failed again, worse than before. When Mark tried to fix it his way the second time, access was denied. "Unauthorized action," the system said. He stared at the screen in silence. Across the city, Laura Brooks faced a similar problem. She worked in a climate research lab. Humans had been close to a breakthrough using creative models that mixed old data with new patterns. The Federation advisors reviewed her work and shut it down. "This approach is inefficient," one advisor said. "Use our approved model." Laura pointed at the data. "But your model ignores human behavior. It assumes perfect control." The advisor's eyes remained calm. "Control is the goal." Laura felt a tight knot form in her chest. Weeks passed. Accidents became rare. Mistakes were corrected before they caused harm. But learning slowed. Innovation faded. People followed instructions instead of asking questions. Children in schools were taught new lessons. History focused on failures. Wars. Mistakes. Destruction. Freedom caused this, the lesson said. Guidance prevents it. Helen Moore, a teacher, stood at the back of her classroom and listened. She saw how her students stopped arguing, stopped debating. They memorized answers instead of thinking. After class, one student stayed behind. "Are we really that bad?" the girl asked. Helen paused. "We are not perfect," she said carefully. "But we learn by trying." The next day, that sentence was removed from the approved lesson list. Mark and Laura met often after work. Not in offices, but in old cafes and quiet parks where signals were weak. Daniel Reed joined them sometimes, listening more than speaking. "They're not hurting us," Mark said one evening. "That's the problem. They're making us comfortable." Laura nodded. Safe people stopped pushing forward. Slowly, others joined these quiet talks. Builders, doctors, programmers, artists. They spoke softly. They shared stories of denied access, blocked ideas, and approved paths that led nowhere. No one talked about fighting. No one planned attacks. They shared ideas. Old designs were passed on paper. Offline notes returned. Handwritten plans filled notebooks. People remembered how to work without guidance systems. Mark reopened an old workshop under an abandoned bridge. No Federation sensors reached there. He fixed broken machines the human way, by testing, failing, and trying again. Laura created simple models using chalk and boards, not computers. She shared them with trusted friends. Helen taught her students to ask questions without writing them down. The resistance was quiet and slow, like roots growing underground. The Federation noticed patterns. Productivity was stable, but something felt off. Humans followed rules, yet small changes appeared everywhere. Unauthorized fixes worked better than approved ones. Problems solved without permission stayed solved longer. Advisors increased monitoring. More limits were placed. Do not meet without approval, new notices said. People smiled and nodded. Then they met anyway. Mark stood in his workshop one night, wiping grease from his hands. A machine hummed smoothly beside him. It was not Federation approved. It worked because he understood it, not because he followed instructions. Laura looked at new climate data and smiled for the first time in months. Her model predicted a storm shift the Federation system missed. Daniel watched the sky again. The ships still glowed softly. Come, patient. They think we are quiet because we accept, he said to Laura. No, she replied. We're quiet because we're thinking. The Federation believed safety would lead to loyalty. They did not understand that humans grow restless when they are no longer allowed to solve their own problems. And in the silence beneath the shining ships, human ideas continued to spread, unchaired, unapproved, and very much alive. The shutdown happened without warning. One moment, the human orbital station Horizon 9 circled Earth as it always had. The next moment, its lights went dark. Power dropped to emergency levels. Communication cut out. Life support slowed. The Federation announced the reason within minutes. This station violated agreed limits, their calm voice said. This shutdown is temporary. It is meant to remind humanity of the importance of order. No weapons were fired. No lives were taken. But the message was clear. On Earth, fear spread fast. News channels showed the silent station drifting above the planet like a dead thing. Families of the crew waited, helpless. Governments requested permission to act. The answer was no. Intervention is unnecessary, the Federation said. We are monitoring the situation. Daniel Reed stood in a crowded room watching the broadcast. His jaw tightened. He had flown supply runs to Horizon 9 years ago. He knew its systems. He knew the people aboard were trained, but without power and support, time was not on their side. They're proving a point, Mark Evans said quietly beside him. Yes, Daniel replied. And so will we. The idea spread quickly but quietly. No announcements. No protests. Just calls, messages, and meetings in small groups. Pilots who had not flown in years. Mechanics with old certifications. Civilian ship owners. Cargo captains. Repair crews. No weapons were loaded. No attack plans were made. Only tools. Old tools. Ships that were considered outdated were prepared. Manual controls were checked. Paper maps were unfolded. Analog systems were tested. Things the Federation did not bother to monitor anymore. Daniel stood before the small civilian fleet in a hangar by the sea. The ships were different sizes and shapes. None of them were advanced. All of them were human. We're not fighting, Daniel said simply. We're fixing what's broken. A woman raised her hand. What if they stop us? Daniel looked around. Then they will have to admit that repair is a threat. The fleet launched at dawn. Federation sensors detected them almost at once. Advisors contacted Earth governments, confused. Why are civilian craft approaching a restricted zone? They asked. The answer was honest. To repair our station. This action is not approved. We know, came the reply. The Federation did not fire. They watched. The ships reached Horizon 9 and docked manually. No automated systems. No remote commands. Just people working together, moving carefully through dark corridors lit by headlamps. Inside the station, the crew stared in disbelief as airlocks opened. You weren't cleared, one engineer said. Daniel floated forward, smiling slightly. We're not here on orders. Mark Evans crawled into access tunnels that modern systems no longer used. He rewired power lines by hand. Laura Brooks worked with the station scientists, recalculating life support needs with simple math and shared knowledge. Nothing was fast. Nothing was perfect. But it worked. Problems appeared. Humans argued. They made mistakes. They corrected them. They shared ideas freely. No advisor stepped in. No approved solution blocked them. Within hours, lights returned to key sections. Oxygen levels stabilized. Communications flickered back online. On the Federation command ship, confusion spread. How are they restoring systems without our support? One observer asked. They are not following optimized paths, another replied. Their methods are inefficient. Then why are they succeeding? A third asked. The Federation had studied human technology. They had not studied human cooperation. Down on Earth, people watched the live feed. No cheering. No shouting. Just quiet focus as humans floated, worked, laughed, and sometimes failed on camera. A child asked her father, "Why didn't the aliens help?" The father answered, "Because they wanted control." "And why are the people fixing it themselves?" "Because it's theirs." After a long night, Horizon 9 was stable. Not perfect, but alive. Daniel floated near a window and looked at Earth below. The planet glowed softly. Fragile. Beautiful. Mark joined him. "We didn't break any rules," he said. "We just didn't wait." Laura smiled. "They thought stopping machines would stop us." The Federation issued a statement soon after. "The situation is under review," they said. For the first time their voice sounded uncertain. They had expected fear, obedience, dependence. Instead, they saw humans respond to control with cooperation, not violence. With old tools instead of advanced ones. With trust instead of orders. The civilian fleet returned home quietly. No medals. No celebrations. But something had changed. The Federation now understood that shutting down systems did not shut down humans. And humanity understood something too. They did not need permission to take care of their own. The change did not come with a single moment. It came like a slow tide. After Horizon 9, people stopped waiting for permission. Across Earth, humans began to speak to one another again, not as separate nations, but as problem solvers facing the same limits. Old borders still existed on maps, but in daily life they mattered less and less. Teacher Helen Moore was one of the first to act openly, though quietly. She stopped using the approved learning system. Instead, she wrote lessons by hand and shared them freely. Not just with her students, but with other teachers across the world. She sent simple files through old networks. She printed pages and mailed them. She spoke in small recorded talks that spread from phone to phone. Her lessons were not about rebellion. They were about thinking. How did people solve problems before machines? She asked. What happens when the answer is wrong? Why is asking questions important? Students listened. Parents listened. Other teachers listened. Soon the same lessons appeared in different languages. Teachers adapted them to local needs. Farmers used them to improve crops. Mechanics used them to fix machines with fewer parts. Doctors used them to train without relying on Federation systems. No one announced a movement. It simply grew. Builders felt the change next. Federation rules limited materials and designs, saying they were safer and more efficient. But those designs did not always fit human needs. In a coastal town, builders used old ship parts to repair a storm wall after a flood. The design was not approved, but it held. In a desert city, homes were cooled using simple airflow systems instead of energy-heavy machines. In mountain villages, bridges were rebuilt with mixed methods, old knowledge and new thinking. People shared results openly. This worked. This failed. Try this instead. The Federation advisors noticed something strange. Damage reports went down, even in places where limits were tightest. Repairs lasted longer. Communities responded faster to problems. How are they coordinating? One advisor asked. They are not following a central plan, another replied. They are adapting locally. That should cause disorder. But it isn't, came the quiet answer. Helen traveled when she could, using ground transport and simple routes. She met teachers in small rooms, libraries, and homes. There were no flags. No symbols. Just shared work. One evening, a teacher from another country asked her, "Aren't you afraid they will stop this?" Helen smiled gently. You can stop a system. You cannot stop an idea once people understand it. Children grew confident again. They argued politely. They tested ideas. They learned that mistakes were not shameful, only useful. The Federation tried to respond. New guidelines were issued. New advisors were added. More monitoring systems were turned on. But control moved slower than creativity. Humans began to bypass limits without breaking rules. They used allowed materials in unexpected ways. They followed safety laws while changing methods. They met limits with patience instead of anger. Daniel Reed watched it all from the background. He spoke less now. Others no longer needed a leader. They needed trust. Mark Evans worked with builders in different regions, teaching them how to repair and design without advanced systems. He never gave orders. He asked questions. What do you have? What do you need? What happens if this fails? Laura Brooks shared research models that anyone could understand. No locked data. No hidden steps. Farmers used them. City planners used them. Even students tested them. The Federation reviewed the data daily. Human cooperation is increasing, one report said. National divisions are weakening, said another. Obedience levels are decreasing, a third noted. The advisors debated. Stronger control will fix this, one said. No, another replied. Control is causing it. For the first time, the Federation began to doubt its own methods. They had believed order created unity. But on Earth, unity was growing from freedom. People no longer asked, is this allowed? They asked, does this help? In one city, when a power grid failed, citizens restored it themselves before Federation systems responded. In another, a medical shortage was solved by local production using shared designs. Across oceans, builders and teachers exchanged ideas without waiting for approval. The Federation ships still hovered above Earth, silent and watching. They saw humans working together across languages and cultures. They saw disagreements that led to better solutions. They saw failure that led to learning. This was not chaos. It was something else. One advisor spoke quietly during a council review. We assumed humans needed guidance because they are divided, he said. But they are uniting because we tried to guide them. No one answered him. On Earth, Helen stood in a classroom filled with students from many places, connected by simple screens and shared lessons. She watched them argue over a problem, test ideas, and finally agree on a solution that none of them had seen before. She felt hope, not pride. Humans were not trying to prove the Federation wrong. They were simply being human. And the Federation, for the first time, began to understand that control did not create peace. It only taught humans how to grow without it. The Federation did not leave in anger. That surprised everyone. There was no final threat, no warning shot, no loud speech sent across the planet. One day people noticed that some of the great ships had moved farther away from Earth. The next day more followed. Their lights dimmed. Their tight formations loosened. Then the message came. It was shorter than the first. Humanity has made its choice, the Federation said. We will not interfere further. Across the world people stopped and listened. Streets fell quiet. Screens glowed in dark rooms. No one cheered at first. No one celebrated. They waited. The Federation continued. You were offered protection. You chose freedom. This decision carries risk. Daniel Reed stood with Mark, Laura, and Helen in a small control room near the coast. The old radar screen showed the alien fleet slowly pulling back. Freedom always carries risk, Daniel said softly. The Federation's voice continued, calmer than before. Our records will mark Earth as a warning. Some species cannot be guided. They must decide for themselves. Then the signal ended. Hours passed. The ships did not return. Days passed. They were still gone. The sky belonged to Earth again. Governments held meetings, but this time, no advisors stood behind them. Decisions felt heavier now. Harder. Real. There were arguments. Mistakes. Delays. But there was also honesty. Humans did not claim victory. No one said they had beaten the Federation. They knew the truth. The aliens had simply stepped aside. Work began almost at once. Limits on space travel were gone, but the old systems were damaged or outdated. Humans did not rush. They rebuilt slowly, carefully, together. New stations were planned, not by single nations but by shared teams. Mark worked with engineers from many countries, drawing designs that could be understood without advanced systems. If it breaks, he said, anyone should be able to fix it. Laura helped create open research networks. No locked data. No hidden steps. If we make mistakes, she said, we make them together. Helen helped write new learning guides. They were simple. They taught history honestly. They showed failure as part of growth, not something to erase. Children learned that safety was important, but choice was more important. Daniel watched the first new human-built ship leave Earth orbit months later. It was not sleek. It was not perfect. But it carried people who understood every bolt and wire. No Federation escort followed it. On the edge of the solar system, the Federation fleet slowed. A council gathered aboard the lead ship. They reviewed records. Data streams filled the room. Human systems show higher failure rates, one observer said. Yes, another replied. But recovery rates are higher. They reject centralized control. They replace it with trust. A senior voice spoke, thoughtful. They do not seek chaos. They accept uncertainty. The council watched recordings of Horizon 9. Of teachers sharing lessons. Of builders adapting. Of civilians repairing what was shut down. They did not resist with force, one said. They resisted by refusing to stop being themselves. The Federation marked the record. Humans, independent, adaptive, resistant to guidance. Then after a long pause another note was added. Capable of cooperation without command. Back on Earth life was harder than before. There were power failures again. Storms caused damage. Not every problem was solved in time. But people responded. When a station failed, volunteers arrived. When a system broke, knowledge spread fast. When leaders argued, others stepped in to help. Freedom was not clean. It was alive. Daniel walked along the shore one evening as the sun set. The sky was empty now, wide and quiet. He felt something he had not felt in a long time. Relief. Laura joined him. They could come back someday, she said. Yes, Daniel replied. But if they do, we'll still choose. Mark laughed softly. We'll probably argue first. Helen smiled. And then we'll try again. Above them, the first human-built ship passed overhead, its engines glowing steady and warm. It did not move with perfect control. It moved with purpose. Humanity reached for the stars again. Not because it was safe. Not because it was guided. But because it chose to. Far away, the Federation watched one last time. They did not see a weak species anymore. They saw one that accepted risk, learned from failure, and refused to give up choice. At last they understood the lesson Earth had taught them. Some beings cannot be protected into greatness. They must be free to become it.